I didn't plan on staying at the Red Pines Lodge, and that's what still bothers me the most. Because if my GPS hadn't lost signal outside Gunnison, Colorado, and if a snowstorm hadn't come down so suddenly that night, I would have kept driving and never known that some places don't let you leave once you've been noticed. And when I pulled into the lodge's parking lot just after 11 p.m., my headlights revealed a building that looked too old to still be operating. For stories of dark timber and peeling white paint, its sign flickering like it was struggling to stay awake, and the lot was empty except for one vehicle parked crooked near the back, its windows frosted from the inside, which didn't make sense because the engine was cold. And as I stepped out of my car, the air felt heavy and wrong, quiet in a way that pressed against my ears, the kind of silence where even your own breathing feels intrusive. And inside the lobby, the warmth hit me immediately along with a smell I couldn't identify at first. Something between rust, mildew, and copper, and behind the front desk stood an elderly man with sunken eyes and skin so thin it looked like it was barely holding him together, and his name tag read Harold, though he didn't introduce himself, and instead stared at me for several seconds longer than necessary before asking if I needed a room. And when I said yes, just for the night, he nodded slowly like he already knew I would say that, sliding a clipboard toward me and tapping one specific line with a trembling finger. And I noticed there were far fewer signatures than a hotel that old should have, long gaps between dates, and when I hesitated, Harold cleared his throat and said, "Fourth floor's the only one with heat tonight." And something in the way he said it felt less like an option and more like an instruction. And when he handed me the key, I saw the numbers stamped into the metal. For 17. And for just a moment his eyes flicked up to meet mine, and I swear I saw fear there. Real fear, before it vanished behind a practiced emptiness. And as I headed toward the elevator, he added quietly, "Lock your door. Don't answer knocks. And if you hear footsteps inside the room, don't acknowledge them." And I laughed awkwardly, assuming he was messing with me, but he didn't smile back, and the elevator ride up felt wrong too. The car shuddering between floors, the lights flickering long enough for me to imagine it stopping entirely. And when the doors opened on the fourth floor, the hallway stretched out longer than it should have. The carpet darkened by old stains and damp under my shoes, and every door looked identical. Except mine, room 417, which lacked a peephole and had a deep vertical scratch running down the center, as if something had been dragged forcefully against it. And when I unlocked the door and stepped inside, the cold hit me first, sharp and immediate, like the room had been refrigerated, and the lights were already on even though I hadn't touched the switch, and the bathroom mirror was fogged over, as if someone had just taken a hot shower. And I stood there for a full minute convincing myself. It was just an old building with bad insulation and worse wiring, and that first night I barely slept, not because of any sound, but because of the overwhelming feeling that the room was occupied, not by something watching me from a corner, but by something that was simply there, filling the space with intent. And at exactly 2:17 a.m., I heard footsteps, slow and deliberate, pacing from the foot of the bed to the bathroom and back, each step pressing into the carpet with a soft, wet sound, and I held my breath, staring at the dark doorway, telling myself it was someone in the hallway, but the sound was inside, unmistakably inside, and when I finally forced myself to sit up, the footsteps stopped instantly, leaving behind a pressure in the air that made my ears ring. And in the morning I confronted Harold, telling him someone had been in my room, and his face drained of color as he whispered, "You slept," like it was an accusation, and he offered to move me to another room. But every other key he tried slid halfway into the lock and jammed. And when I said I'd just leave, he shook his head slowly and said, "The storm hasn't lifted," even though the sky outside was clear, and the second night was. Worse, because this time I woke to the sound of breathing inches from my face, shallow and rattling, like lungs struggling to pull in air, and I could feel the mattress sinking beside me, forming the unmistakable impression of a body lying there. And when I turned on the lamp, the indentation remained, growing deeper, as if something invisible was pressing down harder, and the mirror across the room reflected more than it should have. A shadow that didn't belong to me, standing just behind my shoulder. And when I spun around, Nothing was there, but the bathroom door was slowly swinging open on its own, and written faintly across the inside of the door were fingerprints smeared downward like someone had been dragged away. And I didn't sleep again after that. And by the third night, I was desperate, trying to barricade the door, but the hallway outside had changed, stretching longer, bending slightly, the doors now scratched and dented, their numbers carved out violently. And as I walked, each door began to knock from the inside, softly at first, then louder, fists pounding, voices whispering my name in tones that sounded almost like mine. And when I reached room 417, the door was already open, the lights blazing, and the walls were covered in writing, the same sentence over and over scratched deep into the paint. "You took my place." And the mirror showed a man standing behind me with my face, but wrong in every way, eyes hollow, jaw hanging open as if dislocated, skin gray and bloated like he'd drowned. And he smiled when I realized what I was seeing, because in that moment I understood that room 417 wasn't empty before I arrived, and it wouldn't be empty after, and the last thing I felt was hands gripping my shoulders, shoving me toward the bathroom as the door slammed shut from the outside. And when the police searched the lodge days later after Harold disappeared, they found room 417 freshly cleaned, the bed perfectly made, the mirror spotless, and no record that I had ever checked in, except for one new scratch on the inside of the door and an extra indentation on a mattress that never went away. I checked into the Sunset Crest Hotel in rural Nevada on a night I still replay in my head, because it felt wrong from the very beginning, the kind of wrong you don't notice until it's too late, and I only stopped there because my car overheated miles from anything resembling a town, the desert stretching endlessly on both sides of the highway, like it was trying to erase the road itself. And when I finally saw the hotel sign glowing weakly in the distance, it felt less like relief and more like a warning I chose to ignore. And the building looked abandoned, its windows dark, paint peeling, a single flickering neon vacancy sign buzzing loudly enough to hear even with the engine still running. And the parking lot was empty except for one car parked crooked near the far fence, its trunk slightly open as if someone had left in a hurry. And as I stepped inside the lobby, the air hit me heavy and stale, smelling of dust, old smoke, and something sour underneath it all. And behind the front desk stood a young man who couldn't have been more than 25, pale skin stretched tight across sharp cheekbones, eyes wide and glassy like he'd been staring too long at something he couldn't escape. And his name tag read Ethan, though he didn't say his name out loud, just watched me silently until I cleared my throat. And when I joked about the place being empty, he tilted his head slightly and said in a flat voice, "It's never empty at night," which I laughed off, assuming he meant staff, but he didn't react, didn't smile, didn't even blink. And when he handed me the key to room 302, his fingers brushed mine and they were ice cold, unnaturally so. And as I signed the register, I noticed several names crossed out violently, thick black lines scratching through them as if someone didn't want those people remembered. And I asked Ethan how long he'd worked there, and he answered, "Longer than I was supposed to," before turning his attention back to the security monitors behind the desk. All of them pointed not at the lobby, but at the hallway leading to the rooms, and something about that made my stomach tighten. And when I reached the elevator, I noticed it had no inspection certificate, just a handwritten sign taped inside that said, "Do not use after midnight." And my room itself looked normal enough at first, outdated furniture, dim lighting, a faint hum coming from inside the walls. But the longer I stood there, the more I noticed things that didn't make sense, like the bathroom mirror being warmer than the rest of the room, or the closet door having scratch marks on the inside. Deep grooves like fingernails had been dragged down repeatedly. And that first night, I barely slept, not because of noise, but because of the feeling that the hallway outside my door was active, alive in some way. And at exactly 1 a.m., I heard the elevator bell ring, followed by slow footsteps dragging across the carpet, stopping directly outside my door. And through the peephole, I saw Ethan standing there, perfectly still, head tilted at an unnatural angle, eyes staring directly into the lens like he could see me. And when I opened the door, there was no one there, but the carpet was damp, darker than the rest, and smelled strongly of metal. And the second night was worse, because at 2:11 a.m. the phone rang, and when I answered, Ethan's voice whispered, "He's awake." And before I could ask who he meant, the line went dead, and from somewhere down the hallway came a sound I can only describe as something heavy being dragged, accompanied by wet, rhythmic breathing, and the walls began to vibrate slightly as the footsteps grew closer, each step causing the lights to flicker, and I pressed my back against the door, holding my breath as something stopped just inches away on the other side, sniffing. The sound of air being sucked in through a mouth that was too large, and then it moved on, the dragging sound fading toward the stairwell. And the next morning I demanded answers from Ethan, telling him someone had been in the hallway, that something wasn't right, and for the first time he blinked slow and deliberate and said, "You made it through one," like it was some kind of test. And when I asked him what that meant, he rolled up his sleeve to reveal deep claw marks running from his wrist to his elbow, old scars layered over newer ones, and whispered, "We take turns." And that night he gave me a different key, scratching out room 302 in the ledger and replacing it with room 303, and I didn't understand why until midnight, when the elevator bell rang again and stopped on my floor, and the dragging footsteps returned, louder this time, heavier, and this time the thing didn't stop at my door. It kept moving until it reached the room at the end of the hall, and I heard screaming, human screaming, cut off abruptly by a wet crunching sound, and the lights went out entirely, plunging the hallway into darkness broken only by the glow of the exit sign. And when the lights came back on, the hallway was clean, silent, and empty, and the next morning, room 302 was gone, the door sealed over with fresh drywall, as if it had never existed. And when I confronted Ethan, he looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, and said, "It needed someone who wasn't me." And I realized then that the hotel didn't hunt randomly. It followed rules, and the night clerk's job wasn't to protect guests, but to survive by redirecting whatever roamed the halls after midnight. And on my final night, I woke to Ethan standing at the foot of my bed, staring down at me with that same unblinking gaze, blood trickling from his nose, and he whispered, "I'm done." And before I could react, he pressed the key to room 303 in my hand and walked out, and the dragging footsteps began immediately, closer than they'd ever been, the walls shaking as the thing approached, and I ran for the lobby, only to find the desk empty, the monitor showing nothing but static, and when I reached the front doors, they wouldn't open, locked tight, and behind me, I heard breathing, hot and wet against my neck, and the last thing I saw before everything went black was my reflection in the lobby mirror, standing behind the desk, wearing a name tag that read Ethan, eyes wide, unblinking, waiting for the next guest to arrive.